Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next interview. I'm really excited because we have really an amazing person in the house here. We have Sandra Nomoto. She's going to be kind of talking to us about content editing. She's our content doctor. And what I'm excited about today is this is a really, for a lot of people, an asset, a resource that most of us need in our business. But I feel like we kind of overlook it. I think sometimes we forget the value of having somebody in your team, the value of having someone help you with the words that you use to express your brand, how you help people, how you change the world, and then also how you sell your product. So I'm excited to kind of have an expert on the line today that we can introduce you to if you're even thinking about updating your content, if you've been realizing that maybe you need a little bit of a makeover, Sandra may be your expert that you need. So without further ado, let me at least welcome Sandra. Sandra, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. It was a wonderful intro, and thank you and the Vegan Mainstream team for always sharing valuable content. I've only been following you for a short time, but I've gained just so much knowledge just from what you've shared. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so wonderful to hear. I really love it when we can all be kind of a community that supports each other and helps each other. So I really love when we're able to not only do things like these interviews, but collaborate and chat. And I know you and I have chatted just a little bit in the Vegan Mainstream Village, but I'm hoping that's just the beginning of our relationship.
Great, me too.
So maybe let's give people a little bit of background. Let's give them a little background and maybe let's tell them a little bit your story because I know this is kind of a newer initiative for you. So maybe give them a little bit of background on what you were doing before and where you kind of are today.
Absolutely. So my career started in public relations right after I graduated university in 2005. I started out working for another PR firm and then decided to break out on my own in 2008. And then I was running my own virtual agency for 10 years. So I closed that in 2018 and then just started freelancing and figuring out what my next career path was going to be and did a mix of administration and communications for a few clients and then decided at the end of last year that content writing and editing was really it's something that's always been a strength of mine. Those are really important skills in public relations when you're storytelling for your clients. And so just decided to really start marketing that at the beginning of this year.
Perfect. And I love that you mentioned storytelling because I think a lot of times when we think about the content, we think about just getting the information out. Do I need a title? I need a description. I'm writing a blog post. But I think the idea that we should be telling more stories in our messaging, we should be more kind of doing that communication. Do you have some recommendations maybe for people if they're looking at their content, if they're writing something this week that they should be thinking about so that maybe they can kind of elevate it?
Yeah, I think the big people, or the big thing that people think about is how can I sell more? And I think the more that people learn about you, either as a founder or your team or the backstory of how you founded your company, there's a million different stories. I think of them as gemstones, just kind of waiting to be found. Yeah, and you might have heard of the 80-20 rule as well. You should be storytelling 80% of the time and then selling 20% of the time. Because if you're always pumping out, hey, I've got a new product, I've got a new sale, people are going to get tired of that pretty easily. So you have to have that balance, if you will, of other types of content before you keep asking for the sale.
Okay, makes sense. Now, since we talked about that, there's stories to be told. Let's talk a little about your story, about your experience, especially with you potentially in this current environment. Where and how has this environment maybe impacted your business and kind of your plans that you had for 2020?
It's been really interesting. So pre-COVID, I didn't really have any packages. So I was selling my services by the hour. The only package that I had was website content. So if you were doing a new website, I had a package for that. And then when the pandemic was announced in March, the first thing I did a couple of days later was say, I know a lot of businesses are being hit hard. I'm going to offer a discount. and it kind of went crickets for the next couple of weeks. Nobody was really biting. And then I was able to do a consulting session from a really good marketing colleague of mine. She offered, she said on Instagram, I'm going to offer a 1-hour consult for the next 20 people who want one. And so I jumped on a call with her in early April, and she really helped me to see that, first of all, I was really pigeonholing in terms of my ideal clients in terms of vegan businesses, whereas I really was open to what I call now more cruelty-free businesses. So you, as a founder, don't need to be a vegan, or you don't need to be selling vegan products necessarily. There's a lot of businesses that still fall under the cruelty-free spectrum. So being more inclusive in terms of the clients that I was targeting myself to, that was the first thing she helped me to see. And then the second was reframing my services into packages. So she really helped me to come up with I came up with them on my own, but just gave me that suggestion of packaging them so that people can see exactly the types of services that I can offer every month, and they know exactly what they're going to pay. Because the problem with discounts sometimes is if people don't know of what kind of a discount they're getting, like what was the original price before, it can be a little bit hard to market your services. So that I found was really helpful, and just I find that the time at home, the extra time at home, has also helped me to just stay creative and open to new ideas. So that's another thing that an unexpected benefit, I would call, of this whole time.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point, especially about who should be your target market, who is your customer, especially as vegans. Our challenge sometimes is we want to support vegans, we want to support vegan businesses, but that customer base isn't always big enough yet. Maybe it's not at the scale that we need to be able to support our businesses. So sitting down and saying, okay, even though I am vegan, understanding where you think your services can help and how your services can still help with the things that you're passionate about, that you care about ethically, but at the same time, finding that right niche. So I'm really happy to hear that you kind of worked through that and started to see, okay, maybe those cruelty-free businesses are kind of the place to be in the way I can still service them and still help a larger audience. So I think that's really, really exciting. And I think that's important for a lot of people that are maybe watching this, is helping them understand that you can still be vegan, you can still be an ethical vegan, but your business may have to go with a slightly wider net in the beginning so that you can service and help more people. Also, I find it allows you to help more businesses move forward, because the more they get to interact with vegans, the more they get to interact with people that have that ethical code, that really understand the market, many of those businesses will start to really kind of raise their awareness overall because they get to interact with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I was going to say is that that's another part of the content that you can put out in the storytelling. So you don't need to be, you can educate people as part of the content that you put out, and that can be part of your story, but not have to, again, pigeonhole you. So it's one thing I've definitely learned in the last couple months.
Perfect. One other thing we were talking about kind of prior to our pre-chat before we jumped into the interview is you were talking about doing things like taking classes and so forth. Do you want to talk about, I think a lot of times people have been trying to figure out what to do with this time. I know a lot of states, a lot of our countries, a lot of provinces are starting to kind of release these stay-at-home orders. However, it doesn't mean we're all running back into what we used to do. It doesn't mean all our businesses, some of our companies still have us maybe even working remotely and so forth. So for people that maybe do have a little bit of extra time, people that do find themselves home in the coming future, do you have any recommendation on how they should use that time? Or do you want to kind of share what you've done with your time to help with development, kind of personal and professional development?
Absolutely. I found, of course, the number of businesses that have pivoted to online has increased. And so whereas before, you might have been deterred by having to go to a classroom, now you have the flexibility to do that online. And I would, if not for your own skill building, perhaps think of your team. Maybe your team is on hold, but you can enhance their professional development so that by the time you reopen your brick and mortar business, they've got a new skill under their belt. So I think it's a great time to learn new skills online. And I myself, I was doing a bit of soul searching through this time and thinking, what else can I offer potential clients? And books are something that I've been fascinated with. I launched my first business book last year, and so I've got that experience on the writing side, but with one of my favorite things to do is to edit content. And so the biggest piece of content that I can possibly edit is a book. And so I went online, I found an online book course and finished that in a few weeks, and I'm really excited to start thinking about how I can package that as a service now. So.
Perfect. And I think that's the key is for a lot of people, maybe their businesses are not doing the same amount of sales they were doing before. They're scaling back, they're doing curbside, they've moved online from distribution. And what I try to get a lot of people to think about is that this is the time to do those things that you've always said you wanted to do those things you never had enough time to do. And from an editing standpoint and a content standpoint, I think sometimes for many of us who've been in business for a while, 6 months, a year, 2 years, what happens is we don't always go back and look at our content. We don't always go back and do that refresh. And I really think this is such a great time to do that. I think this is such a great time for people to kind of pay attention to their voice and make sure that their voice is crystallized. Have they been telling the stories of what's happening behind the scenes in their business? I don't know if you have any thoughts or any recommendations for people if they're listening to this and the light bulb's going off and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I should be doing that. Do you have any recommendations on what they should do or what should be their approach?
I mean, I think every business is going to be different. But as you were speaking, I was thinking about the 1 week detox that I took. So I felt in March that there was just this onslaught of content about COVID-19, and it was just too much. And so I took a break from my personal social media. Of course, I had to be on it for a client, but that gave me some time to step back and think about what content do I want to put out. And that timing really worked out well with the new packages. So I was able to kind of think about, okay, how am I going to reframe either my brand or my packages in a new way? So it's personally helped me. And I know not all businesses are going to be able to take that break from social, but if there's a way you as a founder can sort of step away, or even take a break and look at what the content that you've written in the past or put out in the past and see how you can rework that in a way that speaks to your audience a little bit better. I think that'll only be to your benefit. I also heard a stat that the most successful messages during a crisis are ones that talk about safety, emotional release, or control. And so if you're not kind of posting within those boundaries and spreading more fearful messages, again, that's not going to be something that resonates with your audience. So.
Yeah, I think that's good. Really good advice. And I think you mentioned the whole point of feeling like you can't step away. A lot of times what I tell people when they feel like they can't step away is you just reduce what you're doing. So if you're posting 3 days a week, if you're posting 5 days a week on social media, maybe if you're posting 5 days, you post for 2 days. If you're posting 3 days a week, you post for 1 day for 3 weeks in a row. And then that way you're not going completely dry. You're not just, going completely away from it. You still are keeping that momentum going or keeping things going. But because you're not posting those 4 extra posts per week, you can use that time for reflection. You can use that time, like you said, for a little bit of a detox and maybe use that as a time to, recalibrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing is when I think about content and finding your voice, one thing we've been talking about and telling people, and you can tell me if you agree with this or you see it differently, is I've been telling a lot of people that they have to get practice sharing their message. They have to get practice kind of sharing their voice. I have a couple of my clients where I'm having them do videos in the morning. These are not videos that are going to be published anywhere or anything, but every morning they just get up, grab their phone, and tell a story about what happened to them in their business the prior day. Talk about how they're feeling. Talk about what they would want to say to a customer, because maybe before they're ready to put it on paper and ship it out to the world, starting to get them to practice talking about themselves and their business and brands. For some people, we just don't get enough of that practice. We're normally like tinkering away on the product or the service. That I've found that has helped people kind of really help find their message, because they're getting that practice. And especially this day and age when we're not going to events, we're not speaking on stages and things like that. This has been a way I've been helping, people kind of supplement that feeling of speaking and talking, especially if you're not ready for prime time. Have you done anything like that before, or worked with anyone, or had any recommendations on how you've helped people develop their voice?
I think that's a great tip. It's something I've never thought of, but I remember back in my PR days, yeah, I have some clients that are better writers and others that are better speakers. It's really important to be a good speaker when you have a TV interview, let's say, or an online web interview to do. And so we would prep them. We would do some practice interview rounds before that. But yeah, I think the daily video is great, because the more you can do it consistently, the better you're going to be, obviously. And also works on the flip side. There are people who are great speakers, but they're horrible writers. And so that's when you have somebody like me or somebody on your team who can translate that content into written form. And so you're covering the best of both worlds. But I think people are more scared of speaking than they are writing. There's a stat out there. Yeah, people are more afraid of speaking than death, I think. So yeah, I think the better that you can get at it. I'm certainly a better writer than speaker, I think. But yeah, in my early days, I was doing my own YouTube videos, just talking in the laptop, and I find that helped me a lot with my speaking skills.
And that's a point you brought up is, like you said, if someone's a better speaker than a writer, they would have someone like you to help them with that translation. Could you give more examples of when someone should know that they're ready to hire someone like you, to hire someone from a content standpoint? Like at what stage, either in their business or what stage in their experience level, should they reach out to someone like you and consider getting kind of a content doctor in the house?
Mm-hmm. I was just doing a consulting session with somebody yesterday who's a solopreneur, super impressive. She seems like she has a team of 10, but is running selling products all on her own, doing her content. And so I think of somebody like her who, obviously, you have to keep your budget in mind, but if you do feel like you can bring on somebody part-time to help with that content. And maybe it is still you telling that person what you want to put out. But yeah, I think if you can save yourself some time, and so that you can focus on what you do best and running the business, while somebody else can help you put that content out there and tell your story. And then it's also good to have their perspective, because one of the lessons I learned in PR is that we see things that our clients don't. Again, gems about their backstory that are super cool, and we end up using as an angle that they didn't see themselves or thought was actually story worthy. So it's always nice to have, if not a team member, at least somebody else that you can bounce ideas off of.
Okay. And then when we say content, I feel sometimes like those are our marketing words. That's not how everyone thinks. Should we break down what we mean by content? Meaning, are we talking emails? Are we talking blog posts? Are we talking press releases? Maybe break that down for people so they understand kind of when they need to bring somebody in and what type of materials we're talking about of getting that content touch.
Yeah, I like to think of content as any potential type of market communications material you're putting out there. So whether that be social media, newsletters, press releases does count as part of that, I think, although you are sending it to a specific media person or blogger or influencer. I've had a lot of questions in the past, recently, about what copy is versus content, and I think copy is being less used only because it's more advertising related. So it can be copy on your website, but copy for social media, say, would be more of like an ad that you would use to boost So I think content is being used more nowadays because it is overarching and it includes almost everything that you put out, whereas copy is less. So it's more for ads.
And do you think more people need to lean into content? Meaning we're doing a little bit here in social media, we're putting a little bit out, but how much do you feel that people, if they think of their marketing strategy around their marketing strategy, how much content do you think they should be putting out? How much content should they be focusing on, or what portion of their marketing strategy should be dedicated to content?
I think it would be a lot. I think the percentage would be pretty high. I have to think more about that, but I would say it's probably 80%, right? I'm trying to think of marketing that isn't content, actually. Okay. Sorry, I forgot the last bit of your question.
Oh, no, it's perfect. Yeah, because I think a lot of times when people, they think of an email as it's one email, I send it out. You know what I mean? It's almost like it has a limited shelf life. So therefore, they're like, that's not really that much on the content side. They may see a blog post as their big marketing content, only because it lives on the site, it gets indexed and people come back to it. But I was kind of, I guess, hinting at the fact that I think we need to all take a step back sometimes from our marketing and really look at, well, how much content are we getting out? How much information are we really providing to our community? And how much time are we investing in that content so that that content is impactful? And then to your point, how much of that is really copy from a sales side, and kind of pulling that to a side and saying, do I still have enough content left? Do I still have enough kind of information that's really content rich when I pull out any I pull out any copy or any of that those sales components?
Yeah, I think I know where I was going with that now. There's wide and there's deep. So when you go wide with your content, it's like, I'm on all platforms, right? And maybe you run a business that you need to be, and that could be once a day, that could be multiple times a day. But I think you also need to think about deep. So say for business to business, we're going to spend most of our time on LinkedIn, right? And maybe not so much on the other platforms. And we're going to go harder on that because that's what's going to drive us more sales. And then, and then the copy aspect is, okay, I know that this particular piece of content sells, that's going to sell my course or my services. So I'm going to put investment into that particular copy or piece of content. So yeah, there's a lot of factors I think you have to think about, but it all depends on the type of business that you run and who your audience is and where they're spending the most of your time. And of course, what historically has brought you sales in the past. So
perfect. Perfect. And now, do you have any last minute kind of advice or recommendations for anyone, either when they're thinking about their content strategy or they're thinking kind of moving forward, what they should be doing, especially in light of this current environment?
Yeah, I think we talked a bit about, just taking a step back. I find, just getting some perspective always helps with getting new ideas as well. And then the other part is ask for help. So that could be directly your audience. What do you want to see from us? Or going to a consultant like I did, that somebody that you trust, and say, hey, I need an audit from somebody on the outside because I'm too close to my own content, and I just need an outside perspective. I find that definitely helps. So.
Perfect. Making sure getting that 360 view sometimes definitely can help, because we can definitely kind of limit ourselves sometimes when we're in our own business. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really glad we had a chance to chit chat. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about content and the importance of it, because I really do feel like it's it's just it's a great marketing kind of tool or asset in many of our businesses. And sometimes because we're trying to hit a deadline, get something out, we don't take that step back and make sure our story is coming through, make sure that the content matches the voice and so forth. So I'm really glad we had a chance to talk about that today with you. And I'm really glad we had a chance to introduce you to maybe our audience who hasn't been familiar with you before. Do you want to give them either your social media accounts, your website, just in case if someone is looking for help and they'd like to get in contact with you?
Yeah, my website is thecontentdoctor.co. And then on social media, it's just my first name and last name, Sandra Nomoto, pretty much everywhere.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who watched us live. If you're watching this either later or if you're listening to this on our podcast, please just post any questions you have in the comments. I will either jump in and answer them, or I'll give Sandra a call and get her to clarify for us. You know, it's always nice to be able to call up the content doctor and get an answer for you as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next interview. Bye.
Thanks.